Hello, this is the next video in my DevNet series working towards a Cisco DevNet Associate certification. Now, to get a DevNet certification, you're going to need to know the basics of Python. So I'm working towards learning Python basics. I'm working with the book Python Crash Course by Eric Mathis. And in chapter 5, he covers if statements. So that's what we're going to learn in this video, is working with if statements. Now to do this, I've got the Sublime text editor here, and I've saved a file here, chapter5.py, and I'm ready to work in my Sublime text editor. Now what we're going to be learning right now is conditional statements. And conditional statements look like this. You start off with an if, and then is the condition, which will be either true or false. And then you have a colon, and then the block of what gets executed if the condition is true is below it and indented. And you can see here I've indented it 4 spaces. Now in another scripting language like JavaScript, this would be maybe the condition would be in parentheses, and then the block of what happens if the condition is true would be between curly braces. And it would look something like this. And that would be like in JavaScript or some C-like language. The condition is true, we do the sequence or the sequence of statements one after the other between the curly braces. But in Python, we don't need to do that. It's really clean and easy to use. We don't need curly braces because the indentation defines our block. So the fact that this is indented will define the block. And you want to do the same indentation each time, either a tab or spaces. In this case, I've got 4 spaces. So when I do my indentation, I would use 4 spaces each time. Instead of a curly brace here, I'm going to have a colon, and I don't need these parentheses for the condition. So we're going to learn how to do an if statement. If the condition is true, we do this sequence. And this is an if else. If the condition is true, we do this sequence, and then we exit out of the entire block or the entire conditional statement. Now, if the condition is false, we do whatever is in the else block. We do this sequence. Else is for false. So if this is for true, if the condition is true, we do this sequence. And else, that means the condition is false, we would do this sequence. So it depends on the condition here. So this is an if else. All right. Then we're also going to try out an if else. And that's what this one is. If the condition is true, we do this sequence, following, indented. Else if this is false, then we can go on to the next condition and test the next condition. But this one has to be false. If it's true, we do this sequence and then we exit out completely. However, if this is false, we do the next condition. If it's true, we do this sequence. If it's not true, we do the else sequence. So what's nice about this is that we test the first condition, and depending on what happens, we could exit out of the entire thing and not have to go through the rest of the pieces. In other words, if this is true, we just do what's indented following, and then we exit out. Or depending on what happens here, if the first one's false, then we can go on and on. Now sometimes you're just going to need to test multiple conditions. And in that case, you would do an if, and then you would do another if, and another if, and you would test each one. Regardless of whether it's true or false, you're going to test out the next if statement. You're going to test out the next if condition. So if this condition is true, we do this. If it's not true, we just move on and we test the next one. And whether it's true, we do it. If it's false, we test the next one. And so that's how that would work. Now, in these conditions, which are either true or false, right? This is going to be evaluate to either true or false. This is where we use operators. And so we're also going to be using operators. Now, in the video here, we're going to use these operators. We're going to use comparison operators that like the double equal sign. And so this will say, does basically A equal B? And if A equals B, then it'll be true. So this is the double equal sign, and this is basically testing, or this evaluates to true or false. Does A equal B? And if it does, it's true. If it doesn't, it's false. Then this is not equal. This is greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, and less than or equal to. And we'll be using these comparison operators. There's also these logical operators like and. And when we use an and, it's true if both statements are true. So here we have x is less than 5 and x is less than 10. Well, if x is 2, then this would be true and this would be true, and so the whole thing would be true because the and condition is met. Both statements are true. And then we have the or, and it's true if one of the statements are true. So now only one of them has to be true. Is x less than 5 or is x less than 4? So if x was equal to 4, then this would be true, but this would be false. But the whole thing would be true because the condition was or, so only one of them would have to be true. And then we have the not, which will reverse the result. So we could reverse this whole result by encasing it in a parentheses and using the not operator. So these are logical operators. Then we're also going to try out membership operators like in and not in. When we use in, we say, is A present in the object? And the one we're going to do here will be present in the list. So is an item present in the list, or present in the dictionary, or present in the object, basically? All right, let's start testing it out. So what we'll do is we'll go over here and we'll start testing out this code. So in here in the Sublime Text Editor, I'll start by making a variable, author, and saying that it's equal to Hawthorne. So now I've got a variable. And now I can test that. I can say if author equals Hawthorne, and then I put a colon. Now, if that's true, we'll do whatever's on the next line if it's indented. And it looks like Sublime Text Editor has defaulted to a tab indent, and I'll keep that, and I'll say print yes, it's Hawthorne. Something like that. And I'll need to put that between single quotes. All right, so if author equals Hawthorne, so if this is true, we will print. If it's not true, we won't. So I'll do a tools build, and you'll see that, yes, it's Hawthorne. We got to print this because it evaluated to true. Now, if I change the author here, and I say the author is King, and I run the program, you can see it did nothing. It did nothing because this doesn't execute if this is false. So this only will execute on the next line indented if this is true. And if it's false, it's not going to execute. And it's false because the author does not equal Hawthorne. The author equals King. And the author is our variable, and it equals King, the string King. And here we asked it, is it there? Now, let's see if we could just test just if author by itself, right? Let's see if we can test that out. Control B, and yes, it is. Now, if I just say if author, it just means, is there an author variable? And there is one present, so it printed. So that's a different way of using it. So just saying if author is present. So if I change this and I said auth, let's try it now, Control B, and you can see here it's an error because there is no author variable. So nothing happened. All right, so I could say if author equals, let's try nothing and try that. Nothing. So author is an empty string. So I said if author, is it true? Is there an author? It's just an empty string. I got nothing. So you can see how that works. So that's pretty interesting. All right, let's try, we'll put this back to Hawthorne, and we'll say if author equals Hawthorne again, which of course will be true because it is true, right? And this time we'll just print, instead of printing a string, we'll print the variable. Okay, so if author equals Hawthorne, print author dot, let's say, upper. Okay, and then we'll put in an else. So I'll backspace here and I'll say else. Now if it's false, we're going to do this. We'll print it, and it will print author dot, we'll say, title. So if it's true, everything will go to uppercase. It will print Hawthorne in uppercase. And if it's false, it'll print Hawthorne with just the H capitalized. And so I'll do a Control B here, and you can see Hawthorne is all caps because it's true. So we did this, and then we exit. So we don't get to this. We don't do this. But if we change it to, let's say, Alcott, and run it, Control B, you can see Alcott is what was printed, and it was in the title method, which capitalized the A and changed it from a lowercase a to an uppercase A. Now why? Because this was false, so we didn't do this line, we did this line instead. Okay, now we can also put this whole thing and make the whole thing work within what we've been learning regarding lists and regarding loops. And that would look something like this. Let's say you have authors equals, and you have a list. So we'll quickly put together a list here, and we'll say Hawthorne, Alcott, King, and Scott. And I haven't been using King, I've been using Dickens, so let's change that. All right, so we've got a list, an array, authors, Hawthorne, Alcott, Dickens, and Scott. Those are strings. And then we could do this. We could say loop through all of the authors. For author, our variable, in authors, that's our loop. And then inside of our loop, indented, you can see here with a tab, I've got a tab indentation here. I'm going to say if author equals, notice the double equal sign here, Scott. And I'll need to put that within single quotes. If the author is Scott, then we will print that author, and we'll make the author uppercase by using the upper method. Okay, so there you have that. And then we could throw in an else colon, print the author just regularly as it is, which will be lowercase. So that looks good. So now you can see we've got the for loop gets indented, the if conditional statement gets indented for that block, and then the else also gets indented. So once again, Python is really easy to write because you don't have to put all those curly braces, but your indentation has to be correct. So there we go. So that should work. I'm going to do a Control B, and you can see Hawthorne prints, Alcott prints, Dickens prints, and then Scott prints in capitals. Why? Because the first time we loop through this, Hawthorne is the first item in the list. So for author and authors, so the first round of loop, author equals Hawthorne, and so this returns false. So we don't do this, we do this. And the second time it loops, Alcott, this returns false, so we do this. And the third time, this returns false, so we do this. But the fourth time, author equals Scott, and so this will, the condition here will be true, and so we will execute what's on the next line indented, and then we exit the structure. We exit the conditional statement. Okay, so there you have it. That's pretty nice. All right, for the next part, we're going to use the Python interpreter. So I'm going to type Python 3 and go into the Python interpreter, and we'll do a few other things here. So we'll say, in the Python interpreter now, we could just play with our operators. We could say author variable equals Dickens, like that. And then on the next line, we could test it with our comparison operator. Author, the variable author, does it equal Dickens. And once again, there's a difference. This is an assignment operator that assigns the string Dickens to the variable author. And this double equal sign is a comparison operator which compares the two, and if they're the same here, then it'll be true. And if we hit enter, you can see it's a comparison operator because it returns true. And then what we could do is we could say, does author equal king? And of course that's going to be false, so it returns false because we've already said that the variable author equals Dickens. So there you have it. There's the comparison operator. Now I can do the same thing again, except this time use the not equal. Does the author not equal king? Well, the author's Dickens, so yeah, that would be true, right? The author does not equal king is true, so that should return true, and it does. So that's pretty nice. Now another thing we could do is we could say, all right, author equals Scott. Now notice the capital S there. Now if I say, does author equal Scott, it's going to return false because it's case sensitive, and the capital S and lowercase s, those are different. These are two different, the variable is two different values. One has an uppercase s and the other one has a lowercase s, so that's false. But what we could do is we could test that, and we could say author dot lower to make it lowercase, and then test it against Scott. So now you've said, take the author variable, make it lowercase, and then test it, does it equal lowercase Scott? And that should return true, and it does. So that's pretty good. All right, this will also work with numbers, or integers, as it were. So we'll say age equals 18. Now if I can test that with a double equal sign, now I can test that with a double equal sign, and you can see that returns true. But if I used a different number and said, does age equal 20, it's going to return false. Now let's try using one of our logical operators that we talked about, the logical operator being AND. So we could say something like this. I could say age 1 equals 5, and age 2 equals 8. So now we have two variables, age 1 and age 2, 1 equals 5, 1 equals 8. Now we could say age underscore 1, is it greater than 5? And is age 2 greater than 5? So now I've set up a situation where both of these conditions need to be true. Age 1 needs to be greater than 5 to be true, and age 2 needs to be greater than 5 to be true. And if they're both like that, then the whole thing will evaluate to true, because and means that both A and B need to be true. And if we can see, it's false because age 1 equals 5. It's not greater than 5, it is 5. Now we could solve that problem and have it return true by saying, is age 1 greater than or equal to 5? And age 2 greater than or equal to 5? And since age 1 is 5, it's not greater than 5, but it is equal to 5. So this will be true because it's greater than or equal to. And now it should return true. And then a lot of people, when they use logical operators like and, things like that, they like to group it in parentheses to make it easier to read so that you can see very clearly that you're comparing this and this, and this needs to be true and this needs to be true for the whole thing to be true, because and is the condition. So I'm going to make this back to just, we'll say greater than and greater than, and now if I run it, you can see that it's false because age 1 is not greater than 5. Age 1 is 5. So The other thing we could do is we could say, well, instead of making both conditions needing to be true using an AND operator, we could use an OR operator. And with the OR operator, now only one of the conditions needs to be true, and the whole thing evaluates to true because this is false and this is true. So it's only one or the other needs to be true, not both. So that's kind of an example of using logical operator AND or OR. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, let's see here. Let's try using the next example. The video is going to get long, so we got to rush and use the next example. So the next example is we have a, let's see here, we have a variable named toppings, and this is in the book, and we set it equal to a list. And in the list, we're going to have a few items here. Okay, and we'll say in the toppings we have mushrooms, and we have onions, and we have pineapple. So mushrooms, onions, and pineapple. That's a list, and the list is named toppings. So what we can do is we could say, is mushrooms in toppings? And it returns true because it's saying, is this inside of this list? Or we could make it a variable. We could say my topping equals mushrooms, and then I could test it against that. I could say, is my topping in toppings? And that is true. Now what if I change my topping from the variable my topping from mushrooms to olives, and I run it again, and I say, is my topping in toppings? Well, no, olives is not in this list, so this should return false. And it does. Okay, and then if we want to see an else if and an if, let's do that too. So the video is getting long, but we're going to go ahead and just press forward anyway. So we'll say, in this one, we're going to do age equals 12. So our age is 12, our variable age is equal to 12, and then we're going to set up an if, else. So if age is less than 4, colon, then indent 1, 2, 3, 4. Print your admission is $0. Okay. Whoops. All right, hold on. What did I do? I forgot. All right, print. Let's try that whole thing again. Age 12. If age is less than 4, print your admission is, I need to have that, is $0. Okay. Else if, which is done with an elif. Elif. So instead of saying else if, we use elif. Else if age is less than 18, colon, 1, 2, 3, 4, print admission is $10, like that. And I need to make sure I have the double quote. Okay, there we go. Else, you're neither under 4, you're neither under 18, else we will say print admission is $15 or something like that. Right? So that's the adult price, or $20. Okay, so the age is actually 12. So this should return false. And that means we don't do this. We go to the next conditional statement and then we test it. Is our age less than 18? Yes, it is. It's 12. And 12 is less than 18, but it's not less than 4. So this should get printed. And then that means we will exit out of the block. So this will then be skipped. And to test this out, I hit return and then return again. And you can see admission is $10. So that's an example of an if, else if using elif and then else. So for the last example, I'll run the last example in the Sublime text editor. So I'll say, for the last example, flavors equals, and we'll put them right here, strawberry, and we'll just do 2, strawberry and vanilla. There we go. And we need a closed single quote here. So for the last example, we've got a list of flavors, strawberry and vanilla, and that's what we have. Now to test this, we would need maybe to test over and over again to see if we had certain things. So we'd say if chocolate is in flavors, then print we have chocolate. If strawberry in flavors, and enter, then print we have strawberry. And if vanilla in the list flavors, print we have vanilla. So in this situation, we want to test each condition. We want to test if there's chocolate, and if there is, we print something out. And we test, is there strawberry in the list? Then we print something out. In other words, we don't want to exit, because in this situation, if this is false, which it is, chocolate is not in flavors, then we would possibly, if we did an, we don't want to exit out of the loop. We want to test each condition. So in other words, if this was true, right, if this was true and we had else if, then we wouldn't get to the next item. So in other words, if I had chocolate in here, let's just put chocolate in there, and I'll put it in between quotes, single quotes. So now this is true, and if we had an else if here with an elif, then we would never get to the next item. We would never get to this next line, because we'd exit as soon as this is true. We would do this, and then we would exit out. So in this case, you don't want an if, elif. What you want is you want to test each condition. So if this is true, I still want to test this. And I want to test this, and then I want to test this. I want to test all of them. And so we'll do a Control B here, and you can see we have chocolate, we have strawberry, we have vanilla. So we test each one sequentially, because we don't want to exit out of the structure at any point.